So, let's talk about Boone and Sniper. I get so many comments on my videos talking about how these two will be best buddies, and I'm not entirely convinced. So I think your average Sniper main probably identifies with Boone quite a lot, because I think Boone, although maybe not so much, he sort of has this outer shell of being a very edgy, dour, and depressing boy, and that's not quite his personality. Neither is it really Sniper's at all, but I think your average Sniper main usually tends to fall under that sort of like, oh, I am the darkness, I am a lone wolf, I can take on any challenge on my own. Like, I know two Sniper mains, and they're both fairly edgy people. Maybe different flavors of edgy. One of them takes themselves way too seriously. The other one, I feel like she's gonna set me on fire if I say anything bad about her, so I probably shouldn't mention that here. But that dichotomy of the two Sniper mains I own is actually pretty interesting because it really does sum up the relationship between Boone and Sniper, because although they both like come across as really aloof, edgy, I don't want to talk to people type of fellas, underneath they are both very different characters, and it's one of the great things about Fallout New Vegas and Team Fortress 2. You know, New Vegas, it's famous, I guess, I don't know, whichever word you want to use, for its really great, very layered writing. Whereas TF2, although not a lot of story content is really known about it, unless you consider the comics a lot, the characters are still weirdly layered despite not having a lot of material to go on. I just realized I said I own back there. That's really creepy. I don't own slaves, I swear. Leroy Secret Legionnaire confirmed. I don't think Boone will be very happy with that. Sniper might love it though, and we'll get into that. So first things first, I think it would actually be almost out of character for these two to meet, because although Sniper does any job for money, I feel like he's fully mercenary to the core, I don't know if he'd necessarily sort out Boone's quest if he was acting 100% in character. Because Sniper strikes me as the sort of fella who, you know, he wakes up in Doc Mitchell's house, he understands he has just had a lovely impromptu lobotomy, and he's not happy. He is not, like, going down any side quests. I feel like Sniper is a man with a mission. He goes straight for his goal. He's almost very un-Bethesda, to a sense, because your average Bethesda player will like, okay, our job is to go from A to B, but oh, look at the shiny thing. Oh, look at the other shiny thing. Oh, look at the third shiny thing. You know, I feel like most of the time when we play these games, you know, I know, we've been watching Amy play this game recently. It turns into, here's the main quest, but we're now stuck in this DLC where we're in some casino that's really frustrating and annoying to play through. Now, I'm going to tangent here, as I am one to do. I'm wondering if I'll get any comments trying to paint Sniper in more of a positive light underneath this video, because whenever I make any sort of video about Demoman, I always get a million comments being like, Demoman is actually the hardest working of the mercs. Demoman takes his job very seriously, he's a loyal family man, and he's very intelligent. And that is all very, very true. When he's sober. But I think half the comments that venerate Demoman, they almost don't understand that the fact that he kind of needs his booze is kind of his main character flaw. Demoman, although lovely and nice when he's sober, like most alcoholics, his booze, his drinking is his vice. So that is kind of his key character trait that destroys him. So although, yeah, if Demoman didn't have alcoholism, he'd probably do quite well. He'd be a very sensible, reasonable businessman. But that's not who he is. And the same thing with Sniper. So if anyone tries to tell me Sniper cares about the wasteland, he's a good boy. He likes to help people. No, he doesn't. He wants the money. You can't lie to me. You know it's true too. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all the Sniper mains just want him to be the edgy, antisocial one. He doesn't have any friends, and maybe they're really happy with him kicking babies out the window and assassinating like nuns for money. Yeah, who knows? The point of all this is, I don't think Sniper would sort out Boone's quest, because I feel like Boone's quest requires a little bit of curiosity. You got to think, ooh, there's a big dinosaur. What's at the top of that? Ooh, a new best friend. You know, that's something else. I feel like Sniper would be like, nope, a guy shot me. There's my priority. I'm going nowhere else. But I don't know. Maybe Sniper thinks, oh, that's a good sniping perch. Maybe his brain gets a little tingle whenever he's somewhere that is like a good vantage point. Like whenever he's anywhere. Like when he's like high in like a shopping center. He's like, ooh, I could snipe from here, mate. It's a great location. Maybe that's the reason he goes up. He wants to have a sample of the open air and the great vantage point. He's like, oh, there's someone else up here, mate. Hello. You know what? Never mind. That's totally the reason he'd go up there. He'd go up there. He wants to feel the air on his skin, the snipeable vantage point, and he goes, there's someone else up here. And then he gets talking to Boone, and Boone is like, my wife is dead. Now, here's where we get into the big fork in the road with these two that I think would ultimately kind of drive them apart. Although they both have this veneer of, oh, I'm a big tough man, I don't have feelings, feelings are for gays, I think they're both very sort of different in the terms of the way they process their emotions. I don't think Sniper really has many feelings for other people. Throughout the comic, he only really seems to be loyal to his family, and absolutely no one else. He seems perfectly fine to game end Demoman and Miss Pauling in that one comic where they come to visit him, and he only really seems to get emotional around his family, so I don't know if he really has friends. I feel like he's not super chill with any of the other mercs. However, Boone is the opposite. Boone is like sort of hyper emotional. It's sort of almost cute in a way, because he's very much the sort of person who definitely has emotions brimming under that hardened exterior of his. Because it's almost like Boone doesn't like to get close to people because he thinks they're going to get hurt because he's cursed, in his own words. So I feel like there's almost this hyper need for friendship and emotions that Boone has. However, he feels like he shouldn't be giving it to people because he's worried that if anyone gets close to him, they'll get hurt. What a little sweetie pie. Sounds pretty gay. My point being, you've got Boone there, who's sort of throbbing for some love. He wants friendships, he wants to make some buddies. And then you've got Sniper there, who just couldn't give a rat's ass, basically. So Sniper, it's entirely a job. I feel like with Sniper... Now, here's the point. Do you think Sniper would have the ability to lockpick that, the safe in Jeannie Mae's office? Would he figure that out? Is that within Sniper? Because how much stealth do you think Sniper's really invested in? I feel like he'd be decently high in it because it'd be used for sniping. But at the same time, it's like, would he really be pinching things out of people's safes? That's a fair point. Would he invest too much in intelligence? Because I do wonder if espionage jobs would be above Sniper's head. Because I feel like Sniper, although he's very good at what he does is all he does. I don't think he's too into his espionage stuff. He's not like Spy. He doesn't like, Spy would be all over this. He'd be like, oh, because I feel like Spy gets a boner every time he gets it over someone, if you know what I mean. Spy's the sort of person where he would cheat at card games, not even for the money, just to know he could. Just so he could, ruin someone through his own deception skills. That's all he cares about, the love of the game, basically, with him. Whereas Sniper, I feel like, even though he stands on the other side of the map and he pot shots people from there, I feel like Sniper in his head, that's a fair fight, because he point and he clicked. I know some of you are going to write entire fanfiction in the comments about how Sniper's a good man, really. He cares about people, but no, I don't think he would. I think Sniper like, this job's too complicated, mate, I don't care, goodbye. But let's say, hypothetically, for some reason he decides to go through this quest and Boone now loves him. He's killed Jeannie Mae Crawford. Boone's wife has been avenged by the awful lady who sold her into slavery for really, really petty reasons that I cannot get over, by the way. Like, she didn't like my town, so I sold her into a life-tune of servitude. I just can't get over how petty the reasons were for Jeannie Mae Crawford to do what she did. Because I'm like, oh my god, she just didn't like your little town. You know what? It's annoying when someone turns their nose up at something you like. I get it. There's a whole difference between just like, I don't know, rubbing on their door handle and then selling them into slavery. That's... What is it? Proportional responses, Jeannie Mae. Come on. You deserve what you got. But from what I've said so far, I feel like their friendship is already kind of unlikely. And it gets even harder to justify too when, would they want to travel together? Because I feel like Boone, although he kind of wants the friendship of whoever helps him, I feel like I might be over-characterizing Boone as a little too friendly in this video, so that's always a possibility. But, I don't know if Sniper would necessarily want the help. I can't imagine he'd be much for conversation. He's definitely not doing Boone's, companion quest. You imagine Boone tries to open up with him. Sniper just goes, alright. He's got nothing to say about it. I feel like it will be a purely business relationship, these two. Because I get a lot of comments where everyone says, I feel like they begrudgingly respect each other. And that much I agree with. I feel like these two, despite however much I feel like Boone and Sniper would just kind of be, shut off to each other because neither of them is opening up to the other. I feel like their abilities as snipers is one of those things they could both bond over. So maybe they would actually open up to each other. They'd just be like, oh, you're a good sniper, mate. You too, buddy. And that would be where their bond. One of those friendships where it's kind of wordless. You both just kind of know you have a bond, even though you don't say anything. Kind of like one of those. So maybe actually, if we think about it, perhaps if they kept their relationship strictly professional, maybe they'd get along quite well. Maybe they wouldn't, there'd be no fireworks going between them. I don't think they're going to be smooching anytime soon. But I think if they were just both on a job together, I think they'd both sort of get each other. Because although Boone has almost that need to be emotional, the fact that Sniper isn't really trying to get close to him would maybe make Boone like him a bit more, now that I'm thinking about it, because Boone doesn't like people getting close, like I said earlier, because, oh, I don't want to feel like I'm cursing people. But if Sniper keeps himself at arm's length, he's like, you know what, we're professional, we're doing our job together, that's all it is. I feel like Boone would be quite comfortable with that, actually. He's like, you know what, he's not getting close, so maybe the karma monster isn't going to come tear his organs out from behind. So maybe they would get along quite well, just from that respect. So as long as professionality was in place, I feel like their relationship, although perhaps shallow, I feel like it would be amicable. But now, with most relationships, the second you introduce politics, I feel like they would start to fall apart. Because I feel like this would be a real make or break point when it comes to Sniper and Boone. Because in TF2, Sniper doesn't really have any sort of political disagreements with the other mercs. I don't think they all get around at the card table and are all like, right, what's the politics? Which one do we decide with? Red moon or blue moon? Which one has the better policy on localized healthcare? None of that happens. It's all do the job, that's it. And I think that's where Sniper kind of lives. That's where he functions better. But like, Boone doesn't live in that world. Boone is very dyed in the green. He loves his NCR. Although he quit the NCR army after Bitter Springs, Boone is still very clearly firmly on the team of the NCR. Because Sniper, I feel like he's the exact opposite. Sniper has no loyalty other to the almighty dollar. You know, if someone from the Brotherhood or the Enclave or even, I don't know, the Legion came up to him, plonked a big old bag of caps in his hands, that's all he really cares about. I don't think he has any loyalty to any side. Sniper only cares about the side that would make him the most money. And I don't think Boone would appreciate that. I think they probably start off pretty chummy, but as more opportunities come in for Sniper to sort of betray the NCR, I feel like that's when their relationship would sort of start to sour. And that's going to sort of plant these seeds of like, breakup, I'm going to call it. The boyfriends are no longer boyfriends after the money starts getting involved. Because much like a real boy band, the second money gets involved, everything goes to the crapper. As much as you can call a group of a man who's 26 and a man who's almost 50 a boy band, but I don't really know. Because I think the particular scene that comes to mind is that one where you go to Cottonwood Cove and Boone stops you and he goes, hey, we're going into Legion territory. If I see red, I'm taking the shot. Like, how does Sniper reasonably respond in that situation? Because I can't imagine she'd be like, Boone, my mate, we're best friends. I ain't never going to do anything that I'm saying. You know, that seems very unsniperly to me. He's the sort of fella who's like, well, you know what? If they're going to pay me more, I'm going with them. Sorry, bud. I'm moving from the green team to the red team. You know what I mean, Jellybean? But then again, you can do this in New Vegas where you tell Boone, right, you should go home now. And he does just sort of let you to. So I do wonder. See, it's the issue with doing these sort of weird little characters. Sort of like, what if, will they smooch situations? It's like, how much of it do you want to chalk up to this is a game mechanic versus this is the way the character would actually react? Because realistically, I think if I was Boone, you know, the weird, unlikely scenario that I was Boone, if I was like, right, Legion bad, and my mate went, well, maybe you should go home, I would think, all right, this guy's kind of a dick. I'm leaving. But I don't know, maybe Boone's like a new boyfriend where you haven't quite agreed to be exclusive just yet. So, like, he's like, okay, I guess if you're going over there, I'm not to know about this, whatever. Although, I can't see the situation actually playing out because I feel like Sniper isn't the sort of fella who would go down the Legion route. I like to think, in my headcanon, Sniper, he's got his parents back in the NCR, so he doesn't really want to support an army of bloodthirsty barbarians who want to come over and basically stomp down their little farm in the NCR. So I can't imagine he'd be like, oh yeah, it's great, mate. Oh, give me all the money. Because he knows that's eventually going to turn into them taking over or ruining his family life. Which, you know, when I first said that, I thought about the idea that, well, does it make sense that he'd support? Because I don't know if you're probably watching this video not seeing my original short about who Sniper would side with. But my original idea is that I think Sniper is full on Mr. House. Because Sniper, he likes the dollar bills, yo. So in my head, I was thinking, well, he can't side with Mr. House, because then he couldn't go back to see his parents in the NCR. But Mr. House, like he says, the NCR are his best customers. He wants to establish the free economic zone of New Vegas. So Sniper could easily travel back and forth. Well, you know what? I'm remembering that thing in Dust. I don't know if you guys have played Dust, where the courier is labeled a terrorist because he helped kick the NCR out of the region. You know what? Tangent number 2473. I get given so much grief in my comments about using this show as a reference, which a lot of people seem to consider non-canon because people really don't like it for some reason. And I haven't really looked into why. I probably should, considering my entire channel's based around the show. But I wonder if considering Dust as canon is also one of those things that's tantamount to sacrilege, because although it's interesting, I wonder how strictly canonical it would be in terms of how accurate the NCR would view the courier if they were to side with House. Because realistically, they wouldn't be happy about the whole situation. He might have diplomatic immunity, considering that he's technically part of a neighboring state that is like, well, if we do anything to this fella, that state over there, they're gonna come kick our asses, realistically. But again, I think this would all be above Sniper's head politically, because I don't think he's very politically minded. I think he wants money and absolutely nothing else. So I don't think Sniper would side with the Legion, just because they maybe wouldn't facilitate him getting money, because what is there to realistically buy if the barbarians take over? I know they have Daenerys and stuff, and I'm gonna get some legions into the comments being like, actually, we have our own economy, but it's not true. You're lying to yourself. I just want to say, thank you for watching the video in this far. If you've made it this far, comment, sniping pays the bills, mate. You loser. Anyway, tangent aside, I feel like this will be the biggest issue between Sniper and Boone as characters. As much as we like to think they'd be these amazing, lovely, badass battle buddies together, I feel like, although they're both very skilled snipers, I feel like they wouldn't get too close because I feel like Boone would understand that Sniper's loyalty is to money and money alone. And I don't realistically think Boone, at least in the version of Boone where he has the good ending, as I like to think of it, where he stops blaming himself for Bitter Springs, I feel like he'd sort of be like, well, listen, you know, the NCR are my boys. You can't be going against those guys. I love them too much. Mwah. You know, it's funny. I just looked up Boone's endings in New Vegas to remind myself of how his quest ends. And I love the one where, like, you make him vengeful. And I think it's the Yes-Man ending. It says, no target was too violent. No target was too innocent. Boone would take any job he would. And I was like, that just kind of sounds a little bit like Sniper. I love this idea that, by the way, that like, just, he does that whole thing where it's like, we need to go to Bitter Springs, Sniper. I need to confront my past. And then they do that quest. And he's like, what do I do? I'm still here. Sniper goes, get over it, mate. And he just becomes like the really angry, edgy Boone you get at the end. And they just become like, you know, that's the version where they smooch. That's the version. Sniper tells Boone, you know what, mate? Get the fuck over it. You know, shit happens. Stop crying about it. And he's like, we need to be edgy boys together. And then they ride off into the sunset, rifles in hands, holding each other's hands, and they smooch. And that's it.